Welcome to the debut episode of the Hunter Baumgart Show here live on a couple of places, YouTube at Hunter B on Air and also on Facebook, Hunter Baumgart Sports. So you can get us at a couple of different spots. And it's time to talk trade. Brewers, Red Sox. That was a deal that was unexpected this morning. Had a little breakfast. Also, I think I just brushed my teeth and was ready to take on the day. And then this trade came down. Jeff Passan, the first one to report that the Brewers were trading Caleb Durbin to the Boston Red Sox and that Kyle Harrison was headlining the deal back to the Milwaukee Brewers. So we're going to get into the details of the trade. We're going to get into your comments. Would love to hear from you right now on that YouTube stream or Facebook, wherever you may be watching. Would love to interact with you. We'll get to each of these players that are coming back to the Milwaukee Brewers, because when a trade happens like this, everybody just wants to know, okay, who are the Brewers getting? Who are the guys that are coming back and going to be part of the crew in Milwaukee? We'll also take a moment to, though, realize what Caleb Durbin did in Milwaukee, because he had just under a season. Remember, his debut was April 18th of last year. He had just under a season, but he made a quick, fast, great impression on Milwaukee Brewers fans. So I think that's something that we need to recognize in this whole thing. So we're going to get into that as well. And then, okay, the biggest question of the day, the biggest question of today, which is, what are the Brewers going to do at third base? What are they going to do come opening day at third base? Is it going to be someone who's on the roster? Is it going to be someone who's not on the roster? That's going to be the question. So again, feel free to comment throughout. I'll take your questions, your comments throughout over here on the YouTube and Facebook chat. We're also going to hear, and this is where we're going to start, we're going to hear from Matt Arnold, because I'm eager to hear and let you hear some of the comments from Brewers president of baseball operations and general manager Matt Arnold here tonight, because he met with us for about 15, 20 minutes this morning after the trade went down and kind of explained where they're coming from on this trade, explained why he's excited about Harrison and Drowan and Hamilton coming over to the Milwaukee Brewers, what made them make this deal, how long did it take, some of those different things, and who maybe could get some looks at third base or possibly even have a discussion about getting some looks at third base as well, who's currently an outfielder. I think you might know who I'm talking about. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, this is what Brewers president of baseball operations and GM Matt Arnold had to say when asked about his infield depth now that this trade has went through. And the Brewers literally gave up Caleb Durbin, Andrew Monasterio, Anthony Siegler, and a Comp B draft pick for Kyle Harrison, Shane Drowan, and David Hamilton. Now, that was literally, if you look at the third base depth chart for the Milwaukee Brewers with Ortiz at short and Terang at second, right? You look at those and you say, they gave up how many third basemen? Basically, their whole third base depth chart. If you went to Fangraphs, you look at the depth chart of the Milwaukee Brewers, the third basemen were blank. Obviously, David Hamilton is now in there. You could possibly add Jet Williams. We'll get to that. We'll get to who's going to play third base. But it's fascinating when an organization literally trades away a full position on the depth chart. So this is what Matt Arnold said about that infield depth that now includes David Hamilton, along with, of course, Jet Williams, who came over in the Freddie Peralta deal.
Look, I mean, you talk about a lot of the infield depth that we have here. It's, the on top of Jet Williams and Hamilton here, you also have Bryce Terang and Joey Ortiz in the mix. We really like the defense here for sure on our infield. But you also start looking at the future here with guys like Jesus Made and Cooper Pratt and Luke Adams and Luis Pena and Andrew Fisher. I mean, there's just a lot of these types of guys coming, we feel like, in our system that can absolutely handle the left side of the diamond, that have really high upsides. And so we feel like we have the ingredients now, to weather the loss of somebody like Caleb Durbin, who obviously meant a lot to our franchise. But we feel really good about the infield depth, both now and in the future as well.
I think the now and into the future is a very big part of this. When you look at what the Brewers have now, which is not, obviously they say they feel good about it, and I don't doubt it. And it looked like reading some other things that they truly do feel good about their infield depth. However, what it looks like right now is a David Hamilton who's probably good as a utility guy, and Jet Williams, who has never played an inning in the major leagues. So that is compared to a Caleb Durbin, who was top 3 in NL Rookie of the Year voting a year ago, and who burst onto the scene and took a hold of that third base position. So overall, when you look at the infield depth of the Milwaukee Brewers, they, I think, personally, probably got worse at the outset when you look at the infield depth right now. However, one of the things that Matt Arnold continued to say throughout this entire press conference, and really he said it a couple of times, and what kind of rang true when I was thinking back about what he said today, when I was thinking back about, okay, what stuck out to me from this press conference, it was the fact that he brought up consolidating the infield depth for arms and for pitchers. Because we'll get into the pitchers later and how many options they have for that starting rotation, that bullpen, wherever they want to put guys, but it's a whole heck of a lot. And so when he talks about consolidating infield depth and where they stand now into the future, I got to think it's possible that some of these guys might be up here a little sooner than we had anticipated. I'm not saying opening day 2026 or, I'm not saying that necessarily, but I'm saying maybe a little sooner than we had anticipated, because they were comfortable, at least for the very, immediate future, taking away a significant part of that infield, knowing what they had coming up through the system. So when it comes to the infield, we know that guys have versatility, right? Jet Williams can play not only short, but he can play second. Bryce Terang could play short, tried a little last year. Shoulder got a little scratchy, as they said. He went back to second base. Joey Ortiz obviously played third base when he was first in Milwaukee Brewers, slid over to shortstop when Willy Adames left. They have versatility, but who could take that third base position, and how do the Brewers see that third base position? Here's Matt Arnold.
Yeah, always open to additions, I would say first, but at the same time, look, I think there are a lot of ingredients here that we've talked about, and I had a conversation with Murph this morning, and for a while now, just kind of talking about some of the frameworks that we've talked about, and we're not really married to any one particular permutation of the infield here. I think there are a number of different ways we could sort this out. And look, I'm headed to Arizona on Tuesday. And so, once we get into camp, we'll be able to evaluate these guys, spend a little more time with them, talk to them about where they're comfortable. But yeah, feel good about the options that we have available at third, short, and second.
And okay, so I just saw, let's see, we got a comment here from Taco Titan who said, who starts third? Yeah, that's the big question. And honestly, it sounds like Matt Arnold and the Brewers are going to have those discussions in Arizona. It looks like he leaves for Arizona tomorrow. Pitchers and catchers is a couple of days away from reporting. So baseball season is definitely upon us. And that makes this trade even more intriguing, as it kind of went down at the final wire before players want to know where they're going to be for spring training. Now, could another possible addition happen? He's always open to it. That very first part of that soundbite, right? He's open to additions. I got to think that the Brewers are at least going to take a look at what additions they could make in the infield, possibly at that third base spot. Because if I were to answer right now from Taco Titan, who's going to start at third base, it's probably David Hamilton. And I'm not saying that's horrible, but it's not what Caleb Durbin did last year. Caleb Durbin, of course, was a guy who had a 2.8 wins above replacement. That's pretty significant. And then you look at, okay, where are you going to get that from? Are you going to get it from a platoon of Hamilton and Williams? Maybe once Williams comes up, does Williams come up and do what Caleb Durbin last year? Come up in late April and take the world by storm and rock and roll? It's possible, but you're counting on some different things. You're counting on a David Hamilton who last year in 91 games hit 198, 6 homers, 19 RBIs. He's really speedy, though, 22 stolen bases. So that's something to keep in mind. And we'll get more into David Hamilton specifically. But I think I wanted to start this just by who's going to play third base, because that is the big question. When you trade away your starting third baseman, the natural question is, who is going to start at third base? So then I asked Matt Arnold, okay, Jet Williams is a guy who plays shortstop. He plays second base. He plays outfield. He's more of a up the middle guy. What about third base for Jet Williams, a position he really hasn't played?
Certainly value Jet a ton, as you guys know, and I think giving him some reps at third base in camp is probably something that you'll see. Obviously at shortstop as well, and second base and the outfield. I think one of the things that we talked about when we got him was just his level of versatility and his willingness to kind of do everything, and kind of, again, how he fits our brand of baseball, is something that's exciting. And so, yeah, he's open to playing wherever. And, we want to give him a number of opportunities, but again, we want to put him in a position to succeed because he hasn't played third base, yet, but he certainly has the ingredients to do so. So we're going to give him some reps there along with other guys as well.
What stood out most to me at the end there was he has the ingredients to do so. I think he does too. Now, you have to factor in that he hasn't played, again, an inning of Major League Baseball yet. He is going to get a ton of time in spring training at a bunch of different positions. As Matt Arnold said there, shortstop, second base, outfield, now third base. Partly because Joey Ortiz is playing in the World Baseball Classic. Bryce Durang is playing in the World Baseball Classic. Those are significant chunks of time in spring training where they're going to need guys to play the infield. I wonder how much that also plays into the factor of their depth, right? More time for a possible, a guy like Cooper Pratt, Brock Wilken, to be able to play at that major league level, right? It's not Major League Baseball, the games in the regular season. We all know spring training is different. But that's going to be significant time and probably more time for those types of guys who weren't going to necessarily get those opportunities if Joey Ortiz and Bryce Durang weren't playing in the World Baseball Classic. Now, do those starters, also, yeah, they don't need probably as much of a look, right, from the organization as a Cooper Pratt, a Brock Wilken, a Jet Williams, even a David Hamilton, who they're familiar with, who was in the Brewers organization originally. Yes, they don't need as much of a look, and they maybe wouldn't play as much. But I think overall, I think it's interesting that the World Baseball Classic is going on this year, and that they could see some more of that infield depth play because their starting shortstop and second baseman are going to be gone for so long. I mean, they're part of this whole World Baseball Classic is there's, exhibition, you're with your team, you're preparing, and then you play, and then it depends on how long you go, right? If you advance past pool stage and all that. But I think it's going to be fascinating to see who plays more at these different positions. So one more thing about this third base spot, and then we'll get into David Hamilton a little, his background, and then we'll get into the pitching side of this because, I mean, you kind of got to go like this when you're looking at the Brewers pitching. You just got to you get excited. I think when you look at how can't you get excited about all of the options the Brewers have on their pitching staff? But here's what Matt Arnold said about a guy who they experimented with at third base at one point in 2024. You remember this? How about a Sal Frelick? Could he get a look at third?
I mean, look, we're always open to experimenting, and Sal's the best, and he's always willing to just do whatever it takes. So I think it's something we'll discuss when we get to Arizona. But he's also a really good outfielder, Gold Glove winner out there. We like him in the outfield for sure. And we like the other infielders as well. But I love that about Sal, that he's willing to do whatever it takes to help the team. And so certainly something that we'll potentially discuss and explore. Like you said, we've done that in the past, but I would expect he starts as a Gold Glove outfielder for us going forward. But again, open to having those conversations with him when we get to Arizona.
I would expect that too. I would expect that he's in the outfield. I would expect that they try a lot of different things at third base before they try Sal Frelick. Now, could you see him taking some grounders on some days? Don't be surprised if you see video coming out of spring training in Arizona with Sal Frelick taking some infield. I would not be shocked at that. And maybe even he plays a little bit in a game there. But that guy's a really, really good outfielder. As Matt Arnold said, Gold Glove guy, He's shown how good he is, that arm, everything about him in that outfield you absolutely love. It's tough to take him out. I know you have some depth there. You obviously traded away from it in the Isaac Collins deal, but you got Yelich out there. Depending on if he's going to be there, DH. Obviously, you got Blake Perkins there as well, who's fantastic defensively. We'll see what he can do offensively. He's still in the mix. And obviously, Jackson Churio. Kind of your top four guys there. Brandon Lockridge is another guy who you could factor into this trade deadline acquisition of last season in that Nestor Cortez deal. But I would be surprised if Sal Frelick plays third base, unless there's a freak injury or sometime during a game he has to play over there. Otherwise, I would be pretty surprised if that happens. But I do think with the way the roster is constructed right now, I think you have to at least have the discussion, just because you are limited in your depth over there. And David Hamilton is a guy who, you look at what he's done. He played mostly second base last year. He played mostly shortstop in 2024. He has just over an inning career-wise at third base. This is not a guy who he's an up-the-middle guy too. Now, can he play third base? I would think so. They wouldn't have obviously acquired him if they didn't think he could. I would think that the ingredients are there, like Matt Arnold was saying about Jet Williams. But I think it's interesting that he is an also up-the-middle guy. So one of these up-the-middle guys is going to have to play third base if the roster stands where they are now. Now, David Hamilton, an 8th-round pick by the Milwaukee Brewers back in 2019. What stands out about David Hamilton is his speed. And Matt Arnold told us multiple times how much David Hamilton fits the type of player that the Brewers really like. Speed, exciting, great defender. It fits the Brewers mold. It fits the latest, what this type of team has been. It fits the mold for the Milwaukee Brewers. And to be honest, Drowan and Harrison do, and we'll get to them in a moment on the pitching side. They fit the Brewers mold as well. But Hamilton is a guy who, like I said, was in the Brewers organization, went to Boston with Jackie Bradley Jr., and Hunter Renfroe came back to Milwaukee. Remember, he was with the Milwaukee Brewers back in 2022. So before that season, Brewers made that deal, acquired Hunter Renfroe. Now, the 95th percentile for speed. I was talking about how fast he is. Yeah, 95th percentile. So this is a guy who's very, very fast. Last year, 22 stolen bases in 91 games for the Boston Red Sox at the major league level. Now, as I mentioned, he hit 198 last year, 98 games in 2024. He hit 248. So obviously better in 2024 than he was in 2025. I see this as a little bit of a regression from Caleb Durbin. However, if Jet Williams is a guy who they think ultimately could replace Caleb Durbin in that infield, that could be an upgrade. And Jet Williams is a guy who has some more power than Caleb Durbin. So if you look in this grand scope of things and you say, well, what happens if Joey Ortiz goes over to third and Jet Williams plays shortstop? Because Jet's more of an up-the-middle guy. And honestly, a lot of these guys are too. Joey, great example of a guy who goes over to third base and just he was shining over there. And you almost were like, oh, don't move him over short because he's doing so good at third. Well, he was doing great at shortstop last year as well. So you could move him back. I know you don't love to move pieces around, but that would be a quick swap. Another different type of swap you could do is Joey Ortiz to second base, to third base, and Jet Williams to second base, and Bryce Terang to short if you wanted to move 3, but if you just want to move 2, and kind of David Hamilton. I feel like David Hamilton's probably best suited for an Andrew Monasterio role, a role where he's off the bench, he starts depending on what the team needs. But he's a guy who is probably best suited for that role, but right now might be thrust into quickly that starting role if the season started today. But like I said, lots of time here. They still have till March 26th against the White Sox to determine who's going to be that opening day starter. So let's start with let's dive into the pitchers a little bit, because these are two very intriguing arms. And we'll get back to the third base thing because I see some comments coming in. We'll get to those in a moment, because I want to specifically talk about the depth the Brewers have in the farm system and why that applies to today's trade. And we'll get to that. But I do want to get to one more Matt Arnold clip in a moment about these two pitchers. So let's quickly go over them. Left-handed pitcher Kyle Harrison. He was a part of the Rafael Devers trade. So remember where was Rafael Devers going to go? Well, that Sunday night in June last year, right before the Giants played on Sunday Night Baseball, I believe it was against the Dodgers. They acquired Rafael Devers from the Boston Red Sox. Well, Kyle Harrison, it was one of the guys who went to Boston in that deal. So that's what got him over to Boston. Overall, 37 starts, 42 games, 4.39 ERA. So those numbers don't jump off at you when it comes to the ERA, but you look a little deeper and the upside is where you get excited. This is a guy who, when he made his debut in August of 2023, was the top prospect in the San Francisco Giants system. This is a guy who is in every sense of the word, obviously a top third round pick in 2020, like a guy who has a ton of upside. And the Brewers they're so good at bringing in pitchers and getting the best out of them. Obviously, Quinn Priester is probably the latest example, but you could talk about Tobias Myers 2 years ago. You could talk about Chad Patrick. You could talk about so many guys who come to the Brewers and play well. You could talk about position players too. But on the pitching side of things, when a guy has a lot of upside, that's what gets me excited when it comes to him working with Chris Hook and Jim Henderson and that whole staff. So this is going to be fascinating to see how Kyle Harrison is able to develop within the Brewers. Team control through 2030. It's a while for Kyle Harrison. At least he's scheduled to be a free agent 2031. But I think this is a guy who has some control and also has an upside that the Brewers coaching staff is really going to be able to get their hands on. And I think he's definite possibility to make that opening day roster. I would think he would. Is it as a starter? Is it as a reliever? I would think they want it to be as a starter. What does that say about maybe a Brandon Sprout, right? There's a lot of depth. So I'm interested to see where this goes. And then Shane Drowan, eager to see how this kind of sets itself up as well. I kind of see this guy as kind of like a dynamite longer relief role, almost like an Aaron Ashby role. However, he made 11 starts, 12 games in AAA last year and was really good. 5-1 with a 2.27 ERA. So he was really good at AAA. He's kind of been up and down. White Sox grabbed him, Rule 5 draft 2024, but then returned him. And then Boston got him back last June. He was designated for assignment by the White Sox. He had shoulder surgery last February, but Matt Arnold saying today he's not very concerned when it comes to the injury history of Shane Drowan. So slider is nasty, 43% whiff rate at AAA last year with the slider. So look out for the slider. Overall, a 35% strikeout rate at AAA last year for Shane Drowan. That's significant and exciting. So nasty strikeout stuff. And he's 27. He's kind of, been there, done that, but he's still looking for that major league success. And I feel like Brewers get their hands out. I'm eager to see what, again, they can do with a guy who was drafted as well in 2020. So a little older, obviously, than Kyle Harrison, who is 24 years old. That is kind of the quick synopsis of Kyle Harrison and Shane Drowan and where I could see them within the Brewers organization. Let's hear what Brewers president of baseball operations and general manager Matt Arnold had to say about both Harrison and Drowan here.
Yeah, I mean, Harrison, obviously super high pedigree guy that came over in the Devers trade. I mean, he's a huge part of that deal, obviously, and we've had a lot of good reports on him for a really long time. And at one point, I think he might have been one of the best pitching prospects in the sport, and so to be able to access him is really exciting and a really good arsenal there with really good stuff. And the same thing with Drohan, he's kind of flown under the radar, probably a little bit more than Harrison, but this guy dominated in AAA last year. I mean, he was very good. and strikes out a lot of guys and has really good stuff. And our scouts really, really like this guy. He was a very big part of this for us as well. And so the combination of adding both of those guys that we think could impact our team in 27 is really exciting.
What the Brewers do really well is they identify players that they really like outside of their organization and then somehow find a way to get them. A lot of times when you hear these trades go down, and we talked to Matt Arnold afterwards, a lot of times he's like, this is a guy we've had our eye on for a while. This is a guy our scouts really like. This is a guy they look at other organizations and are able to pick guys who may not be as valued in those other organizations, and then they come to Milwaukee and they're valued, and the scouts say, all right, here's what we think, and here's what you could do. And obviously they get them in the pitching lab, so to speak, and with all the great pitching minds that the Brewers have. And then a guy like Quinn Priester, is right there. I mean, Quinn Priester is a great example because he came from Boston in April last year when the Brewers, of course, gave up Yoferi Rodriguez in that deal. So this is another situation where I am eager to see what Drowan does. Does he start the league or start the year at the major league? Probably not, I would think, just because of the depth they already have. But he's got 5 minor league seasons under his belt. This is a guy who's as I mentioned, been there, done that, and he's been a consistent starter. 104 games, 89 starts. So he's been a consistent starter. I just think this is a guy who, like I mentioned, like an Aaron Ashby, who can fit into that longer relief role. Now, will Ashby sit at that long relief role? I kind of think so too. I think he might. It sounds like from what Pat Murphy has said and everybody, that it's possible that he sits. I mean, Pat Murphy really likes what Aaron Ashby does in that relief role and how his body bounces back. Not every pitcher can do what he did last year, and we all know how effective he was in that scenario. So, and that in that position that he was in the bullpen. So that is kind of where that sits and where the two pitchers sit. If I were to say, will Kyle Harrison make the opening day roster, I would venture a yes. And if I would Drowan, I would think not quite yet. David Hamilton, I think, is pretty much a lock right now, unless another move is made. And that gets back to some comments coming in here on the YouTube and the Facebook. Thanks so much for joining tonight. It's the debut of the Hunter Baumgart Show. We're just doing a little reaction to the Brewers trade with the Boston Red Sox. One of the big questions today, Michael saying, how about Isaac Paredes? This is a guy who is an infielder for third baseman for the Houston Astros. They have a plethora of infielders in Houston. He's been on the training block. According to The Athletic over the weekend, there were multiple teams in on him. The Red Sox were one of them. And obviously, this takes them out of the running. The Pittsburgh Pirates were also in the running. They signed Marcell Ozuna. Not that has a direct role. Ozuna's outfielder, but I do think because they spent money there, maybe they won't take on Isaac Paredes either. And it sounds like, I would think the Brewers are at least going to inquire and see what it would take if possibly another move is up their sleeve. Now, if that would be the case, that would be an upgrade from Caleb Durbin. I mean, that would be that would be an exciting move. That would, I think, kind of turn this whole thing into, okay, that was the long-term deal. The problem with that is if you're counting on a long-term, the second deal to happen, right? You make one trade to make another. I think the Brewers had to make this trade like suitable enough for them, right? Where they were in a position where we have to make sure this trade works because, there's no guarantee of making another deal. There's no guarantee of signing a free agent. There's no guarantee of anything else. So they had to make sure this deal was going to work for them if this is going to be what their opening day roster looks like. Now, as I mentioned, Arnold continued to bring up during the press conference today, or at least did a couple of times, saying that, they've consolidated that infield depth. They felt like they could draw from that infield depth for a trade for a couple of pitchers to try to eat up innings, because we all know what happened injury-wise last year to the Brewers, and that infield depth They felt like they could deal from it, and they did. Now, the wild thing is Caleb Durbin has 6 years of control. So when you look at that, you say, oh my, like that's not what the Brewers do. They don't deal from guys who have a lot of control. What we know the Brewers to do is trade Corbin Burns with a year left, is trade Devin Williams with a year left, is trade Freddie Peralta with a year left, is trade Hader with a year and a half left. That's what the Brewers do. So that's why this was surprising, because as much as Hamilton, Harrison, and Drowan are all guys who fit the Brewers mold, this is not necessarily what the Brewers do. So I think that's maybe the most surprising. But I do think that they must think, and I just saw this coming back. Let me see here. Ben in the 414 saying, some players might be coming up sooner than we may have thought. Appreciate you, Ben. I think that is a possibility. It's a possibility. How I don't think, I think Cooper Pratt and Brock Wilken are probably that left side shortstop. So Wilken at third, Pratt at short, at AAA probably to start the season. I mean, you look at last year, Pratt played 120 games in AA. So hit 238, 31 stolen bases, 8 homers, 62 RBIs. Brock Wilken battled injury, 79 games last year, hit 226, but 18 home runs in those 79 games. Obviously has the pop there. I would think those two guys are in Nashville. And how long does it take? We'll see. And then I think kind of the next crop is Jesus Made, Andrew Fisher. Fisher finished the year playing 19 games with the Timber Rattlers in High A. Jesus Made finished the year in Double A, but he only had 5 games under his belt. Folks, if you're looking for Jesus Made in 2026, I would be shocked if Jesus Made plays for the Milwaukee Brewers at the major league level in 2026. I think he is still a ways away. Now, 2027, possibly. Now, are Cooper Pratt and Brock Wilken a possibility? I think those are possibilities, maybe possibly late in the year. But again, every time, that you think about this and you think about this trade, they didn't deal from the minor leagues. They dealed their major league club, which their major league club, which makes me think that maybe a minor leaguer is closer than we think. All right, let's go to some more comments here. Let's go to Dan. Keep Ortiz and Terang where they are. Stay strong up the middle defensively. Hopefully they'll figure out the corners, especially third base. Yeah, I like where you're coming from, Dan, because when you look at where you want to be most, I mean, it's hard because you're like, I want to be really good defensively in every position, but you want to be really good up the middle, right? Double plays, stolen bases. Where does the most action happen? Second base, other than first, sure. But you got Vaughn and Bowers over there. I think we're set over there. Shortstop, second base, right? That's where things happen up the middle. You want good up the middle defense. Now, I don't mind this defensively at third base if you put Hamilton out. Like, Hamilton's a good defender, and you could say great defender. So I don't mind that. The problem is you're going to need offense from there, especially since you don't know what Joey Ortiz is going to give you. As good as Joey Ortiz is defensively, we all know what he did offensively in 2025. Now, I personally happen to think Joey Ortiz has more in him, and I think we'll see more of that in 2026. I just have this good feeling about Joey. Maybe it's optimism, maybe whatever it happens to be. I think he's got more in there. And I think, but you do have to be careful, because then all of a sudden, if Joey Ortiz is hitting like he was in 2025 and Hamilton is hitting like he has in his career, low two, you got to be careful with that. If Hamilton's getting the majority of the playing time. Now, where Jet Williams fits into all that is also obviously a significant role as well. Let me see. Joe commenting, I like the trade. I still thought we could have gotten Jordan Montgomery or Quintana for a cheap deal. I like the Paredes idea too. That's the thing, Joe. I was pretty convinced that the Brewers were going to get a veteran pitcher to go along with this rotation, to kind of replace Peralta, not a frontline guy. They're not going to get a number one, but somebody to kind of come in, kind of like the Quintana deal last year, where they make the deal around spring training, and they make the deal and they say, all right, we're going to bring you in, and you're just going to kind of be an anchor in that rotation, along with Brandon Woodruff, of course, who will likely be the opening day starter. But you bring in Kyle Harrison, and you can only have so many roster spots, as we know. So I was kind of thinking more veteran rather than Kyle Harrison, but I don't know. I think I'd guess that Harrison would get more of a chance of a spot than them signing a starting arm. But then you look at salaries and you say, okay, the Paredes idea, if you bring him in at third base, that's kind of your salary that you would give to a veteran starting pitcher, probably a little more, but to get Paredes. But I was with you, Joe. I was pretty convinced that they were going to sign a veteran pitcher. I don't know if they are now because they've just got so many names that are ready and that can contribute to the Major League Ball Club. Let me see here. Roger says Williams has more bat and we need a bigger number of stolen bases out of him. Ortiz is such a liability at the plate. So a couple things. Williams does have more power and I think is overall a little bit better hitter than Caleb Durbin. I think he just more upside over there, and also the raw power is just there more. Durbin wasn't necessarily known for his power, but boy, was that guy clutch, and he could get on base. And Jet, yeah, we'd love to see some more stolen bases than Caleb Durbin. That's why I was excited to see Caleb Durbin though in year 2. I mean, we have to remember that it was just the first season of Caleb Durbin in the major league at the major league level. So that's why I was excited to see what he can do in year 2. Jump those stolen bases up, have a little more confidence, have some swagger. He had swagger and he's great, but have a little more. And I was looking forward to that. So I, excited to see what Williams can do, though. I'm very excited, and obviously Matt Arnold and the team is too. Excited to see. And Roger saying I don't think Arnold is done quite yet. I agree, and he made reference to that today that they traded for Willy Adames in May. Everybody, so things can happen at any time. Let me see here. Pete. Why did we get rid of young, talented guys with plenty of team control, plenty of upside clutch hitting? He showed up big in October. Durbin stings. Yeah. So this is where I agree, Pete. This is the hurt that I kind of feel. And I saw actually some reaction on social media saying that this, as Brewers fans, it hurts a little more to lose Durbin than it did Peralta. And it's not comparing what they did on the field. It's not comparing the longevity. We were all prepared for Freddie Peralta leaving. We were very, very, sure. Not very sure. I was actually thinking and hoping that maybe Freddie Peralta would stay for 2026. But we all knew kind of in the back of our minds and our heart of hearts that probably the Brewers would deal him with a year left on his deal. The Caleb Durbin thing, I think, is some of it is the shock. That this is a guy who, like I said, 6 years of control, was clutch in October. Like you said, plenty of upside. This is just, it's non-Brewers to do that. Now they got 3 Brewers type players back. So, okay, that makes a little more sense, but this one's going to be one of those where you keep track and say, how good is Harrison? How good is Hamilton? How good is Drowan? I mean, how good are these guys years down the road? Because this is obviously Caleb Durbin is significant loss. And I think as Brewers fans, I think we need to take a moment as well to think about what Caleb Durbin did for this franchise and what Caleb Durbin did for this organization. Now, it was a really short-lived time. He was traded the Brewers for Devin Williams back last winter, debuted April 18th. Only spent May, June, July, August, September, about 5-6 months if you count October, probably total, right? Mid-April to mid-October, 6 months at the major league level for the Brewers. But this is a guy who was obviously nicknamed Happy by Pat Murphy. And Matt Arnold was asked about Pat Murphy's reaction to this trade today. And Matt Arnold said he was on board and he's in full support. And I believe that. I know Pat Murphy has significant trust in the front office, but I also believe that it stung. It stung Pete, stung you, stung me, stung everybody a little bit today to lose a guy like Caleb Durbin from your team. Caleb Durbin is really is a good ball player. And now, what they did with Isaac Collins is they sold high on Isaac Collins. Now, Isaac Collins also tailed off the later part of the season, but he was up for top 5 Rookie of the Year voting. But they sold high on him. I was okay with that because he tailed off. Caleb Durbin didn't really tail off. And you had been looking. This is the other thing, too. You had been looking for a third baseman. Like this team had been looking for a third baseman for a long time. And I think obviously to some degree, they still are. But maybe they didn't think Caleb Durbin was at least the long-term, you can put long-term in air quotes, right? The solution when it comes to how long. I don't know necessarily how long he was the solution because Brock Wilkins coming up, and obviously you're going to maybe shift things around when it comes to Pratt and Made and Pena and Fisher and all these guys. Eventually, how long did Caleb Durbin have? And maybe if I would have guessed, I would have said that's when you trade him, but they trade him now. So yeah, I think it is very important. Everybody kind of take a moment, and yeah, you can be sad about this, absolutely. So not that I need to tell you how to do, but I just think you just have to think about that. Spencer Williams chiming in here. Spence, do you think the trade is anticipation of the possible lockout? That is something I hadn't necessarily considered. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's not like you were doing anything salary wise necessarily. But I get where you might be going with this. You're going the pathway of if there's a lockout, then maybe the guys would be ready faster out of the minor leagues. But then again, if it's a lockout, it's a lockout. But I don't know. Sometime we are going to understand how much the lockout had an impact on this offseason. I know a lot of people and a lot of sources and people are saying it's not necessarily having that big of an impact, but I got to think it's on the minds of at least some executives. So I do at some point wonder when we'll get, maybe we'll get a time with Matt Arnold or someone and eventually and understand how much of this offseason was affected by the lockout. So very, very good question there. Let me see here if there's any others. Jeremiah, thanks for chiming in here on Facebook. Again, we're live on YouTube, Facebook, talking about the trade that sent Caleb Durbin, Andrew Monasterio, Anthony Siegler, and the competitive balance B selection to the Boston Red Sox, and for Kyle Harrison, Shane Drowan, and David Hamilton coming to the Milwaukee Brewers. Jeremiah saying move Ortiz back to third base, Williams at short, at least give him a look there. Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying a little earlier is I feel like that would maybe be because what you're doing then is Joey Ortiz has significantly more major league experience than Jet Williams. It's not like Ortiz is a wily vet like Yelich, but he's a guy who's been there, done that at the major league level, 2024, 2025. Jet Williams hasn't played an inning at the major league level. So I think if you're going to move the guy who's been in the major leagues. So I also think we have to keep this in mind too. The Brewers are very much a franchise that they do not have a set lineup a lot, right? They use a lot of different lineups during the season. Vinny Capra homered on opening day last year, right? He had a great spring. He was part of the White Sox not too long after. Like, we have to remember that the opening day lineup on March 26th at American Family Field for the 2026 season isn't going to be necessarily the lineup we see in September. So I think we have to keep that in mind. It's also not the lineup you might see on March 28th. What I mean by that is, let's say David Hamilton gets the start at third base on March 26th. Maybe on March 28th, Joey Ortiz slides over to third and Jet Williams starts at shortstop if he's up if he made the opening day roster, right? So I think there is going to be some shuffling here, and I don't think that one lineup is going to be the key. However, like any franchise, you want to see you want to say, I have a starting third baseman, right? I have a starting shortstop. I have a starting second baseman. So I'm interested to see. By the way, if you're looking at the 40-man roster right now, Brewers have 38 players. So they have 2 roster spots open on the 40-man. Jake Bauer. So this is your infielders right now on the 40-man roster. Jake Bowers, Tyler Black, Bryce Durang, Joey Ortiz, Andrew Vaughn, David Hamilton. So you say Bowers and Vaughn are first. Tyler Black not going to get looks at third base. I really don't think so. From what we've heard from Pat Murphy, likely not going to happen. So then you have Ortiz, Turang, and David Hamilton for those other spots. Obviously, Jet Williams is also a possibility, and that's why they have a couple of roster spots open. But today was the 3-man swap. What I mean by that is 3 guys on the 40-man roster for the Brewers, for 3 men on the 40-man for the Boston Red Sox. So take that for what it's worth. All right, going to wrap up here soon, but let's see if there are any more. Let's see. Pete, Durbin was a great fit for the type of baseball we play and the type of vibe we look for in a player. 100%, Pete. And that's the tough part. You lose you lose too many of those type of guys, and your identity is going to be a little different. Now, I also think Pat Murphy is going to instill his identity and his culture into the guys. I also think something that Matt Arnold, and I want to get this quote right. Matt Arnold said about David Hamilton that he has as much energy as Caleb Durbin, very exciting, athletic, and a good defensive player. He said multiple times how much David Hamilton fits this type of mold that the Milwaukee Brewers go to when it comes to position players. So I think it's something very to keep in mind here that David Hamilton is a Caleb Durbin type. I don't know if David Hamilton is at the same level of Caleb Durbin. Maybe he plays at the same level. Maybe the Brewers do what they do with a lot of players and bring him into the organization, and he's better. Back to the organization in this respect because he was with them after being drafted in 2019 by the Brewers. But so I think they got the type of player. However, can he be as impactful as Durbin? That remains to be seen. Let's see here. Joe says Harrison could be awesome. That is the big, if you are looking at the return and saying, Hunter, what is the most intriguing upside of this entire trade? It's Kyle Harrison. Kyle Harrison has big potential, and it's not every day that you get a guy who was once a number 1 prospect in an organization. And that was Kyle Harrison when he made his debut for the Giants in August of 2023. So I think you have to take that into account 100%. Durbin and 6 years just seems like a lot. Yeah. So pretty appreciate it, Joe. Thanks for the kind words there. Anything else coming in? Any final comments? Andy says, how about Wilkin and let him learn? I do think there is going to be at some point a learning curve for those guys. I don't know if it's right out of the gate when it comes to opening day. Players are going through systems faster than maybe ever we've seen. But something Matt Arnold stressed to us today was they don't want to put guys in positions where they're not comfortable or where they don't think they can succeed. And they don't want to rush anybody. That was the big thing. They don't want to rush anybody. So knowing that, I think Wilkin waits, and just the fact that he hasn't played in AAA yet, Cooper Pratt the same way. I would think those guys start in good old Nashville, and maybe we see him at some point this season. I don't totally disagree with you, Andy, saying that Wilkin should, you can just see what happens. But I do think you want to have him ready. I mean, Caleb Durbin started at AAA last year, was doing well, and they said, all right, he's ready. Let's rock and roll. And that worked out great. You want to make sure these guys are ready. That's what gets me sometimes a little bit about Jet Williams too, I don't know if it gets me. I don't know if that's the right word, but like what you have to remember with him is that he has not made his major league debut yet. So as much as we're factoring him into this, and as much as it's like Caleb Durbin last year, as much as we're factoring in Caleb Durbin, you have to be careful because these guys have not, Caleb Durbin last year, Jet Williams this year, have not played at the major league level. And if you say, okay, Jet, you're a second baseman, a shortstop, an outfielder by trade, but we're going to put you at third base first and welcome to the big leagues. That's a huge jump. Now, if I've no doubt that he could probably do it. And as Matt Arnold said, he has the ingredients to do it at third base. But you have to remember that because you're not only now he could have a great spring. I mean, he could have a great spring and he's going to get a lot of looks at those different positions in spring. And maybe that is what ultimately leads you in the right direction. So I'm interested to see what happens. Let's see. Jake, Kiki Hernandez feels like a Brewers move. Yeah, he is still out there. Almost every year they pull a 1 to 2 year veteran. Yes, you're right here. As he says, Reese, Kutch, Jackie Bradley Jr., Donaldson, Quintana, Shaw, Grandal, the list goes on. Obviously, a new GM and loaded farm for infield, but wouldn't it put it past them to take a flyer on a veteran free agent infielder? There's not a lot left. Urshela was scooped up today. But Kike Hernandez is out there. That is a really good point, Jake, because you look at those names, and that is the type of that's the Brewers do add that, right? You you look at this infield and the major league experience, not a ton. When you look at second base, right? Bryce Terang it was well established and everything, and Joey Ortiz a couple of years. But when you look at other guys, Jet Williams, David Hamilton, these are guys who have played, but it's not like you don't have a guy like those guys, right? You don't have a guy like Reese. That's as even an option right now at those positions. You don't have one of those guys. Every guy that you're talking about here that isn't Hamilton, or Williams or Ortiz or Terang at the major league level is all less experience. So maybe instead of starting, now that they got Kyle Harrison, maybe it is a veteran more guy, and that would be Isaac Paredes if they go and trade for him. Again, not that they're expected probably to talk to the Houston Astros about that, but have not heard anything about those talks yet. But I think you have to, so maybe it is a veteran infielder instead of that veteran pitcher because you got Kyle Harrison. So something to keep in mind as well. Roger saying, excited to see these two pitchers get into the lab and see what they do with them. Absolutely, Roger. You got it. 100%. Excited to see what they do with the pitching lab. So that'll do it for the first edition of the Hunter Baumgart Show here. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you're on Facebook, really appreciate it. If you're on YouTube, really appreciate it. If you missed any of this, if you tuned in late and you're like, oh man, wish I would have tuned in, you can go back and watch as much of this as you want, either on Facebook or YouTube. We're going to do these more often. Brewers season is right around the corner. Pitchers and catchers are reporting. This is going to be a blast. I know that dealing away Caleb Durbin and heck, Andre Monasterio, like a guy who was a huge part of the record-setting win in Cincinnati last year and that home run and the extra innings and everything like that, and other walk-offs, and just being that guy who was ready for anything and could literally step into any and all roles. That's a guy you miss as well. So that's something that you keep in mind too. So we definitely thank Caleb Durbin and Andre Monasterio for the memories that they provided us as Brewers fans. And so a couple things to keep in mind. I'm going to be joining the Huddle on Fox Sports 920 tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. to talk with Drew, Billy, and Armin about this deal. So looking forward to chopping it up with them. 7 a.m. tomorrow. You can listen on the iHeartRadio app, Fox Sports 920, or Fox Sports 1070 in Madison as well. We're on in Madison as well, 5 to 8 a.m. Drew, Billy, and Armin every morning, and I'll be popping in with Brewers coverage as well. So that's 7 a.m. tomorrow. Then also coming up on Wednesday, I had a chance to sit down with Brewers assistant hitting coach Daniel Vogelbach. So that was a blast. I talked to him last Friday. So we are going to play that interview on the Huddle coming up tomorrow. I'll have more on that on my socials. Just follow me at Hunter B on Air, Twitter, Facebook. Where, if you're on the Facebook page right now, Hunter Baumgart Sports, that's where it is. YouTube. And so I will it was a really fun conversation with him, getting back to Milwaukee, this time in a coaching role. So that'll be on the Huddle coming up Wednesday morning. So we'll have plenty of Brewers talk as the season comes near. And we're going to do more of these. Really appreciate the engagement. Thanks to everyone who commented. That was awesome. It's really fun to react and talk about your comments and just kind of how you're feeling after a trade like this. Some like it, some don't. I know earlier Mike was saying that he was not a huge trade or not a huge fan of the trade. Mike saying don't like the trade. Yeah, there's that sentiment out there. I get it. Just give it a chance is what I'd say. Donna, appreciate the comment as well. So really fun first venture of the Hunter Baumgart Show. Thanks to everyone for watching or listening. And what we will do is we will talk to you